I'll be your chair, Mayuri Patel, and I'm delighted to be joined by so many young Londoners from across the capital. We have representation from Barnet to Bromley, Hackney to Harrow, and Wandsworth to Waltham Forest. It's wonderful to have so many of you to join us this evening. I mean, who said young people don't care about politics? Each and every one of you in this room proves that's false. I also know that more than half of you will be voting in your first ever mayoral election. I hope you're all excited. I'm buzzing. And now for some housekeeping. We are recording the session and live streaming this. So if you don't want to be recorded, you can turn your camera off. I will say if you're under 16, it's best to keep your camera off as well. The chat will be open throughout, so please do use that to share your reflections, questions and ideas. And we'll be running polls throughout the evening so that we can hear from you all. Let's do our first poll. You'll see the instructions on your screen. Pick from the options. Is London a fair city for young people? Mark your answers now. Oh, they're coming in, swift. There's about 90% of you have almost voted. And what have we got? Quite fair. Oh, that's quite good. So we want you to share about this event online through your social media channels, whether you use Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, or any other platform. Do use the hashtag Mapping Young London and the hashtag Get Involved to encourage those in your networks to engage with the upcoming London mayoral election. We are going to be live tweeting, and you can find the handles for the organisers in the chat box now. Before I introduce our key guests for tonight, I just want to take stock of the strange times we're living through. Over the last few years, trust in politics and the government has been in decline. We've seen a rise in discrimination and hate crime, with many from underrepresented communities feeling isolated and distant from the decision-making of elected officials. The feeling of isolation has been compounded by COVID-19. Every single one of us has been infected by the pandemic, and we now know that this has had a profound and disproportionate impact on young people, whether it be disrupting our education, making it harder to find good employment, or impacting on our mental health and well-being. Many of us are looking forward to the future, which brings with it a unique opportunity to reset how we think about politics and how we engage with one another. There is no going back to business as usual, but by working together, we can forge a brighter, more hopeful future. Today, we'll hear some of our priorities, and this is only a small view of the concerns many of us have for the future. I'll be inviting some of the young Londoners to give us a short presentation on issues that matter most to them, before we then move to an open Q&A. We'll be picking from the chat as well as those of you who've raised your hands on Zoom. So I'll be looking out on the Q&A when it opens up to the floor. We want to ensure that we have a healthy working relationship with the Mayor of London, who's on screen now. Hello. Where young Londoners are able to engage directly with policies that impact us the most and help us make London fairer for all. And with that, I'm delighted to invite the Labour candidate for Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan. Sadiq, can I please invite you to share your vision for London and what your key priorities are for the young Londoners?
Well, thanks, Mel. I'd like to start by thanking both the Patchwork Foundation and Partnership for Young London for this opportunity. I'm really looking forward to hearing from you and answering your questions. I've always been passionate about helping young Londoners and working to ensure that everyone in our city has a shot at making the most of their talents. That's why I've done so much to support young Londoners in my first term, from investing £70 million in community projects and youth clubs, reaching over 110,000 young Londoners, to helping more than 1,000 young people become trained in digital and business skills. But there's so much more I want to do as we recover from this pandemic, because I know that many young Londoners have suffered dearly over the past year, missing out on school and university life, bearing the brunt of job losses, and being deprived of social contact during such a formative period of your lives. We simply can't let this pandemic result in a lost generation. That's why I'm determined to put young Londoners at the heart of our recovery efforts. I've already announced £544 million of investment in London's economy and made helping young Londoners a pillar of London's recovery programme. A top priority for me is jobs, jobs, jobs. This means helping to create thousands of high quality, future proof jobs for young Londoners, targeted at those who need them the most. It means ensuring that young people can gain the skills they need to succeed in the industries that will be key to London's recovery, such as in the green, creative, and digital sectors. And it means ensuring that every young Londoner is entitled to a personal mentor and can access good youth facilities. I believe that with the right choices, we can deliver a better and brighter future for young Londoners after the pandemic than before, and that we can make London a greener, fairer, and safer city where no one is left behind. So if you want that brighter future for London, with the support that young Londoners need, then I urge you to vote for London by voting for me on May the 6th. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's really cool to hear about how much you care about employment for young people at the moment. It's a good tagline, jobs, jobs, jobs. That seems to be the headline. So thank you so much, Sadiq, for sharing some of your priorities. I'd now like to invite Daisy Deering and Marura Bazis to share some of the key findings from the Mapping Young London report that was published just yesterday.
Hi, my name's Maura. I'm 21 and I'm a university student. I've done a lot of young people community work. I'm interested in the environment, diversifying the curriculum, and just general concerns for young people.
Hello, I'm Daisy, I'm 14 and I'm a student in Islington and I'm a part of Partnership for Young London. I'm going to introduce the report. The report is called Mapping Young Londoners. We spoke to 1,600 young people, some in surveys and some in focus groups between November and December. We want to understand how young Londoners felt about London after a year of lockdown. We wanted young people to make their voices heard, as the survey and its questions were largely put together by young Londoners for young Londoners. In fact, I'd like to take this moment to thank everyone who was involved for your brilliant contributions to the project. And I'd like to pass on to Marwa.
So considering that this research project was done during lockdown, it's shown that COVID has exacerbated some underlying issues and different groups of young people have been affected differently. However, one thing that unified it was that young people saw that the government response was bad. 3 out of 4 young people said that the government did a bad job. This varied. People who had disabilities were more likely to think that than others who didn't. A lot of people thought that the idea that this new normal of being online was not accurate because it shouldn't be something that would be normal, and a lot of young people are tired of it. This leads on to thinking about the local area. The report shows that young people saw their local area differently. And this again depended between the different social situations of those people. So people who had a better social situation were more likely to think that their local area was better, others not. This again leads to ideas on housing. A third of young people said that COVID had negatively impacted their housing situation. Again, this varied. People who had suffered disabilities were more likely to have a negative response to that compared to others. Another thing that highlighted was students. A lot of people who had smaller housing situations felt like they didn't have the space or the priority from the government because there was a lack of privacy or not enough study space compared to people with bigger housing space. This leads to future plans. A lot of young people said that their future, over 50 young people thought that their employment plans had changed. And again, that varied depending on age groups. So those between 22 and 25 were more likely to have their plans changed. And then lastly, youth services were gone mostly in COVID, and that affected the ability for young people to feel optimistic about the lockdown.
These issues are on top of issues young Londoners have already been facing and do currently face. For example, priorities for young Londoners. Housing, employment, and mental health are the most important 3 issues for young Londoners, safety and the police were the least important. However, priorities are different for different groups of young people. Black young people prioritise mental and physical health, while white young people prioritise housing and Asian young people prioritise employment. Young people aren't a homogenous group. Another issue faced for young Londoners is trust in the police. Less than half of those surveyed said that they trusted police, while 4 out of 5 said that they believed there was systemic racism in the police. In general, 3 in 4 young people said that discrimination was common in London. And there's work experience. 3 out of 4 young Londoners want work experience, but just under half can afford to do an unpaid internship or work experience. The most common barrier to getting work experience, according to young Londoners, was a lack of connections. This can relate to COVID because of, Wi-Fi and things like that. But it can also relate to lack of connections at school, depending on area. And regarding careers advice, only a third of young Londoners say that they have appropriate careers advice and guidance. Next, there's youth voice. Almost 10 young people said they do not feel they have a say in how youth services are set up and run. Over half of young people thought that the media portrayal of young people was either not very fair or not fair at all. Nearly half agreed that, quote, politicians don't care about people like me, with Black young people and working class young people much more likely to agree. Finally, the cost of private renting. Almost 9 in 10 young people said that the biggest challenge to private renting is the cost, with many young people unable to afford to live in the places they grew up. Most people say were concerned or very concerned about not having a stable or safe place to stay.
The things we highlighted kind of highlight just some of the things that the report discusses. There are many more situations and things that we need to look into. However, I think that young people need specific attention that is different from different generations. And I think things like the COVID and the pandemic have highlighted that. But again, young people are not homogenous. And so we need a mayor that understands that young people, need specific attention, but also differ depending on the communities that they come from. And again, we need a mayor who will highlight that, especially when the dominant government right now is saying a lot of kind of lacking in some of the things that young people need. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Before Sadiq responds, I don't know if you want to say anything, Sadiq.
Well, I'm happy for as the presentation finished.
Yeah.
Well, the good news is I don't think there was anything that you said that was a complete surprise to me, and that's the experience we've had over the last 15 months. I think the phrase used by Mayoral was it's exacerbated the situation. I think it's exposed and exacerbated some of the structural inequalities in our city. A lot of it is towards those who are poor Londoners, those who are Black, Asian, minority ethnic. But I like what Daisy said about you can't assume that all young people are one homogenous blob. And we've sought not to do that at Daisy. One of the great things about our city is we don't simply tolerate difference, we respect it, embrace it, and celebrate it. And so one of the things we're trying to do, Daisy, is making sure when it comes to our recovery plan coming out of this pandemic, we acknowledge that actually if we're going to have a proper recovery and avoid repeating the mistakes of the 1980s, when lots of people of my generation were written off because of mass unemployment and not being given a helping hand, we've got to make sure there's a proper plan that gives young people opportunity. That's in relation to having the skills for the jobs of tomorrow. That's in relation to being able to continue to live in London. One of the big concerns I have, Daisy, is that young Londoners are leaving our city because they can't afford to stay here. So private rental is really important. Of course, we need to build more genuinely affordable homes. In the meantime, we've got to fix the private rental market. I'm in favour of rent controls. I've got a plan to stabilise rents, give security of tenure. And the third part, which is really important, Daisy, is making sure that we continue to be a global city that allows young people to fulfil their potential in London without going elsewhere. So I'm really keen to, during the next hour, discuss some of the ideas you've got, but also share with you some of the ideas I've got that's in my manifesto. The manifesto is not the limit of my ambition. Think of the manifesto as a floor, not a ceiling. So that's the minimum. But it's really important that we learn some of the lessons that the pandemic has exposed in relation to has it that's been suffering in relation to being at home, lack of social contact, schools not being open, university life not being the same, the apprenticeships not being there, the graduate jobs not being there, and all the other things that you care about so much. But let's have that discussion over the course of the next hour.
Thanks for that. Thank you for responding. So next we have Sarah Ahmed and Reese Lukeman, who will now share their reflections on what the Mayor of London could do better to support care leavers into employment. So we'll have that presentation first.
Hey guys, I'm Reese. I work with Patchwork for Young London, working with the care experienced young people across Pan London Children Care Council. Sarah, would you be able to share the infographic, please? So on your screens, you'll see we held a Pan London Children Care Council meeting with around 50 care experienced young people around the impact of COVID-19. We identified 3 main areas which are shown in the infographic on the screen. These are mental health, employment and housing, so very similar to what was just discussed. But we're going to focus mainly on employment amongst other areas you can work with us on. I'll pass on to Sarah now, who will speak in more depth about this.
Yep. Hello, everyone. As Reece said, my name's Sarah. I work for Partnership for Young London as part of the Children and Care Council, and we're also both care leavers. So yeah, we both kind of have an inside view on this. So I think, as everyone knows, those in and leaving care already find gaining employment really difficult. And this is primarily due to a lack of targeted roles and apprenticeships. And this has definitely been heightened by the pandemic. But whilst jobs continue to decline, bills won't stop. We still have a lot of responsibilities to take care of. And as highlighted by the Mapping Young London report, those with an experience of care were much more likely to have future employment plans change as a result of COVID and the lockdown. And they were also twice as likely to go without essentials compared to people without care experience. So that was about 35 to 17%. Another thing that has really kind of resonated with us is the need for free travel for care leavers up until 25. I believe this to be a necessity personally. A lack of free travel makes it harder to access essential services, which we really do need, to access employment and to socialize, which we know is so important for mental health, especially during this time of isolation. So we have had conversations around travel before, we do know this, including, the Zap the Zip campaign, which a lot of people on this call have worked alongside us with, but care leavers are often really left out of this conversation. It's often people that are under 18 and those in care rather than leaving care. I mean, we're forced to live independently, sometimes as early as 16, and we are solely in charge of tasks like cleaning, decorating, managing finances, and we don't necessarily have the assistance from family or the support system that a lot of other young people may have. So as mentioned by the speakers just before me, the mayor should take an equitable approach, as there are definitely unique needs for different groups, and care leavers and those in care are one of those groups that have unique needs. So, just to sum up my points, targeted employment opportunities and free travel is something that can really, really change the trajectory of care leavers' lives, and it can brighten the futures of an often very marginalized and silenced group. So I'll just pass back over to Reese, who's going to say a few more points.
Thanks, Sarah. So everyone speaks about corporate parenting, but we want London to be based around the principle of less corporate and more parenting. We feel like this can be addressed in partnership with yourselves and various other businesses. This pandemic has really highlighted actually the importance of digital access. So we want you to lobby network providers alongside us to provide free Wi-Fi for care leavers. We also want the best possible offer for care experienced young people across London. So we need to get a more standardized local offer across boroughs, including council tax exemption. One thing that also really stood out to us, that there was a lack of access to arts and culture events and venues. So we would love if you could work with us on trying to get a free arts and media card for care leavers and also discount benefits. Finally, let London be a trendsetter. Let's be ambitious and let's create the best possible offer for care experienced young people. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Reese and Sarah. Before Sadiq responds, there's another question from Joe Ash-Brown, a member of London Youth's Youth Board, to ask his question as well. And then Sadiq, you'll have your opportunity to respond. I hope you're quick with the note taking there. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Josh Brown. My question will be how will you ensure young Londoners get the most opportunities possible for employment and don't suffer the worst impact of COVID-19?
Perfect. So Sadiq, would you like to respond to what you've just heard?
I don't want to sound patronising to Reece and Sarah, but can I thank you for the care responsibilities you took on board? It really is inspiring to hear from you. I meet carers often, and it's inspiring, particularly young carers. And I know, for those that don't know this, often if you have been in care and you leave care, often your ability to fulfil your potential is less than for those of us who haven't been in care. We've got to acknowledge that. And we've got to give the helping hand to allow those who've been in care to have their potential fulfilled. And so some of the things you've talked about again, Sarah, Reece, the good news is we're talking the same language because we're doing some work in this area. We've already done some work. Let me tell you some of the good news and some of the future work we're doing. So one of the pieces of good news is we've had free travel in London for those below the age of 18 for some time. And during the pandemic, like every transport authority in the world, because fewer people were using TfL, we had less fares coming in, which had an impact on our budget. And what the government sought to do was to attach conditions to giving us financial support. And one of the conditions they wanted was to take away free travel for those below the age of 18. And they talked about allowing those below the age of 11. And I said no, because I understand for many of you, it's your freedom to get about the city, but also to allow you to do the things that you do. So we managed to defeat the government's plans. So under 18 travels is still there. And if I'm re-elected, I promise you, it will continue to be there. And I've been honest with Londoners, the way I've paid for that has had to be out of sorrow. I've had to raise council tax a bit for those that can afford to pay it, to pay for free travel for those below the age of 18. But you're right, we've got to do more to help care leavers. So let me just give you examples of some of the other things that we are doing. So as part of the adult education budget that I'm responsible for, it's about £300 million. We've guaranteed courses free for those leaving care. And I focus in particular, and it goes to the question asked by Joash in relation to how we're helping young people get work. And the sectors which I think are future-proof sectors where young people should get the skills for the jobs that are being created is green jobs, digital jobs, creative industries, and health and social care. Separately, we're doing work around construction as well. So the idea is we've made a deal with utility companies, the NHS, Transport for London and others, and they've agreed to take on apprentices. Care leavers will go to the top of the queue, and young people at the top of the queue, because we need to make sure you can get the training, get the jobs, and start doing the stuff you're going to do, which is to be productive citizens. The other part of the conversation that you raised was the issue of council tax relief. The good news is, as the mayor, Londoners have to pay a proportion of their council tax towards what's called the GLA precept. I've exempted care leavers from that, and that's the deal we've got with the councils. Going forward, the thing I can't promise today, but I want to be honest with you, Sarah and Reece, is what happens to those above the age of 18, below the age of 25. So the good news is I can guarantee 16 to 18. 18 to 25, I can't give you an answer now for the simple reason we've got to renegotiate with the government the financial package we get from the government. The current deal comes to an end on May the 18th, and in the negotiations, I'll be lobbying for additional concessions for, I think the point Reece made was care leavers below the age of 25. And what I'm happy to do, Mayoral, is come back to you at a future date after we've had the deal with the government to let you know how successful we've been to get some of the stuff that you're calling out for. The final thing I want to say in relation to the question asked by Joash is really important. One of the things we do know is London is a global city, and some of the most successful businesses in the world are in London. What I'm saying to them is the quid pro quo of you coming to our city is you've got to be taking on Londoners to do the jobs you're creating. And that means helping them get the skills for the jobs you're creating. What we don't want is you saying, crossing around and saying, listen, we're advertising jobs, but Londoners aren't good enough to get the jobs. No. You've got to work with us to give Londoners the skills for the jobs you're creating. And the good news is we've got agreement from those in the creative industries in particular, green in particular, digital in particular, and health and social care. And so we're hoping that will lead to young people getting the opportunities they need to have the potential fulfilled. And by the way, a prerequisite of this is they've got to be decent pay, living wage jobs at the minimum, and because living in London is so expensive. And at the same time, we're making sure that we reduce the cost of housing as well. So I think you'll be pleased by some of the policies we've got in place, building on some of the work over the last 5 years. It's really important. We also, final thing, Reese, one of you mentioned, or Sarah, the issue of access, digital access. So the big thing we've noticed here is there's a huge amount of digital poverty, digital inequality. And there are three main reasons for this. One is lack of skills, one is lack of connectivity, and one is lack of kit. And so on all three of those areas, good news. On connectivity, we're now rolling out 4G across the underground network with sites on the Jubilee line. Think of the 270 tube stations and the underground as the spine of a future 4G, 5G across our city. So that'll improve connectivity. Every new building is required now to provide full fibre. Just like we've got water, gas, electric, we need to have full fibre. That's there as my London plan. The second thing is skills, in relation to giving parents the skills to work with their children, but giving those who are currently working the skills to get to progression in their work. And the third part is equipment. We're currently, I've got very generous donors of tablets and laptops. We're giving them out as soon as we get them. And we're working with other charities, the third sector, to make sure those Londoners who've not got the kit can get the kit free, so they can have access to the equipment that gives them access to all sorts of things that digital does.
Thank you so much. We are running behind a bit, so we'll move things on. But thank you for the response, and thank you for the questions. Just to take some heat off Sadiq, it's Ramadan after all, time for another poll. Do you feel that the voice of young people is reflected in decision making? Also, thank you to everyone for commenting in the chat. As I said, if you want to comment on your own social media channels, hashtag get involved and hashtag mapping young London. So do you feel that young people's voices are reflected in decision making? And quite a few of you responded. Oh, some of you are saying hardly ever. I think that's the majority. Only 2% of you have said, and that was 2 of you that said most of the time. Right. Well, thank you for your responses, guys. Thank you so much. And so for the next presentation, we've got Syason and Shelby, who are going to present their priorities on wellbeing and mental health support.
So hi everyone, my name's Syason and I'm currently studying my A-levels. So today I'm going to talk more about young people's mental health and also some other problems faced by young people. I wanted to open up the discussion with a statistic from a survey that we carried out, and around half of the young people we spoke to disagreed that appropriate careers advice, training and employment support was available. Now, this could be in turn due to COVID, but I feel that for young people, this is a serious issue, especially for those who are maybe not looking towards the uni side and look more towards internship sides and apprenticeship sides. Without having these resources seen as available, I feel like more of a push is needed towards young people to show that these resources are available towards them. And Sadiq Khan already mentioned the fact that he's trying to open more jobs in sectors for young people. But if these sectors are made more available, then maybe the fact that young people don't see it as being available, maybe more of a push is needed towards to increase awareness towards job opportunities and employment support. And with there being more coverage towards young people's mental health, there's obviously going to be in turn a much higher demand for mental health support. So I think as we have to think about how we can co-design and support something that can transform the landscape of mental health services and improve choice and accessibility. Young people, through talks with young people, it was found that they related more towards topics that were actually produced by young people themselves. And as Daisy mentioned, we aren't just a homogeneous group. So to have resources that are actually co-designed with young people and have young people's points and views co-designed into these resources would actually make it something that young people can relate more to and can actually be more useful. And many young people we spoke to weren't actually aware of resources available for their mental health. So again, this goes to the fact that there is definitely a divide in awareness towards what resources young people have for themselves. and we need to push this forward and let young people know in certain different ethnicities and backgrounds the fact that these resources towards their own mental health and mental well-being are available. And it then again goes back to the whole fact that young people still aren't aware of the careers advice and employment support that is available towards them. And as a whole, it's clear that more awareness is needed towards what young people require. So thank you.
My name's Shelby. I'm an apprentice at Great Ormond Street Hospital as a healthcare assistant. I wanted to open up another point that came from our survey was that revealed a huge mental health crisis within young people, with over half showing signs of a bad well-being and over a third showing signs of depression. This was a massive statistic that came out of our survey, and I thought it was important to raise this today. Another point that came out of our findings was creating a single point of access so parents and young people don't spend ages looking for support. There are many ways we could do this, and there's many ideas to put forward, such as having mental first aiders in schools and jobs so that people do have a single point and someone to talk to when they need it, coming up with apps and working with different organisations on different things such as anxiety, eating disorders, identity, having more awareness in schools, such as PSHE lessons and within employment to train people in their career developments, but also making sure their well-being is there. This also links to youth services because physical and social well-being is just as important, and a lot of people have lost this due to the COVID pandemic. Having more youth services in London would allow people to spend more time together and actually involve their physical health as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much to both of you. Sadiq, would you like to respond to what you've just heard?
Firstly, many of you may not know this, but Sayasan and Shelby, thanks to the work of Partnership for Young London, joined me recently on a good thinking roundtable. And so the good news that both Sayasan and Shelby will be pleased to hear is, number one, I guarantee we'll have a single point of access like you want. I heard you last time when you spoke, and that's in the manifesto. The way it's going to work is, the idea is that parents, carers and young people don't have to spend hours on Google trying to find help. I know the challenges, Shelby, there can be. And so we're working with the NHS to do just that. So, good news there. Second piece of good news there is, I think you're spot on about the need for decent careers advice, Sayasan, because it's pushing young people into the right future-proof sectors, the right skills, giving the right advice. Also, I can confirm we're going to be doing that. The third thing that's really important is I think the role of youth services, youth clubs. And so we're going to guarantee two things for young people. One is a good quality youth services near to where you live. Secondly is a mentor. Some of us are lucky, we've got great head teachers. The school I used to go to, Ernest Bevin College, the head teacher there, a man called Mr. Bakari, he's unfortunately passed away now. He was a mentor to me, as were my big brothers and my coaches. I was lucky. I know many young people haven't got a mentor. And so we're going to guarantee every young person a mentor. The other thing, which is really important, is to make sure that we transform the mental health landscape. Can I just say, Mayori, we should give so much credit to Sayasan and Shelby for talking about mental health, because the stigma is huge. Look, I'm a grown man, I'm the Mayor of London. When I spoke about having some mental ill health because of the lockdown, I was criticised by my political opponents. And that's me. And so it's really important we get rid of the stigma. And I've got to be honest, in some minority communities, there's more stigma than others. And so we've got to talk about it and become, conversant in talking about, just like we talk about physical fitness, mental fitness. And so what we've done, Shelby and Sayasan, thanks to your help, and a number of young people helped us, there are a number of tools now we've got. There's a good thinking app, there's Thrive London, and a few other tools we've set up, but it can't just all be social media. There's got to be face-to-face stuff. And so we're also, Maori, lobbying the government to give child and adolescent mental health services more funding. Mental health has always been the Cinderella service in the NHS. There needs to be parity of esteem between physical health and mental health. And I've talked about it. So I'm now a trained mental health first aid person, giving help to people who need it. We want more of those in schools. Every school will have a mental health first aid person and a mental health first aid trainer, and we're going to roll them out across London. And it's really important we start young, because if we from a young age can become conversant and confident talking about mental health, that'll build resilience and stoicism. So later on, there aren't challenges. And so it's really important that as your mayor, I talk about this and give you support in this really important area. And this is a really good example where actually Partnership for Young London have been integral to some of our plans from City Hall.
Thank you so much. That's a cause that's actually kind of close to me. So now we want to hear from all of you. Please do raise your Zoom hands or pop your questions in the chat, and we'll take a few questions from the floor. I must say we've not got loads of time, so I can only take a couple, so apologies. If I just have a flick through. I can see Mamatha's got a hand up. Mamatha, have you got a question? Oh, no? Okay, I think she's been muted. How about Marvin? I can see you've got your camera off, Marvin.
Hello.
Hiya.
Hi. So what are you doing to help young children who are in foster care to get better opportunities?
Thanks, Marvin. Maurice, I'll do one at a time. Would that be easier, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, I think one at a time, because we've only got so much time anyway, so.
So Marvin, a really important point. So strictly speaking, the statutory services we're not in charge of, but we're trying to lobby councils to do far more to help those who are below the age of 16. So in answer to a previous question, that was about care leavers, because they leave the care sector, they're 16. Children in foster care are the responsibility of councils. But Marvin, I'm really happy for you to let Myri know offline any particular concerns you've got. I can raise with your council. The good news is now we've set up something called the London Recovery Board. And so I co-chair with the chair of London Councils, Georgia Gould, a regular meeting to discuss our recovery. And young people are one of our 9 missions. If there's particular concerns you've got around the foster care system, let me know. And I'll be more than happy to look into it.
Perfect. Okay, we'll take 2 or 3 at a time. I'll say we've got till 20 past, guys. So yeah, so if you can take Mamatha, because I think she had a mistake before. William, I can't see the rest of your name, William, I'm sorry, but hopefully you know which one. And Sunny as well, please.
Okay, Mamatha.
Hi, so I'm a domestic violence advocate, as I'm a survivor myself, and I know that that's not particularly the remit of necessarily the work in regards to that, but knowing, as they were discussing earlier on mental health, I know that there's been an increase, like a crazy increase in domestic violence, especially amongst young people. And in regards to having, head teachers like you had, some people don't have that support, but I know that young people like to receive help from youth workers, and I know that a lot of youth support centers have been closed. So what work could you do in regards to that to make sure that young people are getting that support for there to be more awareness and for there to be the right people to support them? Because that's really important, because I know from my own experience, I couldn't just go to my teachers and talk about the abusive relationship that I was in, but attending a youth club that called the VYG really helped me to have youth mentors that could help me in regards to that specific area.
Yeah, got it. William?
Hi, Sadiq. Currently, knife crime is worsening, especially in Croydon. We're seeing an increase in knife crime. And we know that simply throwing in more police officers is not the answer to the question. More has to be done, more has to tackle the root cause of knife crime. So what I want to know essentially is, what is your plan to tackle knife crime and deliver safety on London streets?
Thanks, William. Great question. Sunny?
Yeah. In your manifesto, you talked about introducing rent controls, and seeing how your powers as a mayor are limited, what makes you think that Boris Johnson is going to allow you to implement things like this? He's already shot down your attempt to look into cannabis decriminalization. He's clearly not going to work with Labour to this extent. So is your putting this in the manifesto just an attempt, just rhetoric, and you're not actually it's not going to result in anything? Or is this something you're going to work really hard towards? Because there's been a 27% rent increase since 2010. It's only fallen by 12% this year due to the pandemic. So I want to know what you're actually going to do, because you have no power in this topic.
Great. Well, thanks for your question, Sonny. Usually it's only my staff or Tory opponents who read a manifesto, so I'm glad you've read it. And let's take all three questions one at a time. So first, Martha, thanks for your question, and thank you for being so brave and talking about the fact that you are a survivor of domestic abuse, domestic violence. So look, you raised a really important point. There is something we can do, and we are doing stuff, because you're spot on. We've got to be supporting survivors and victims, but also training up teachers, youth workers, and others to be trauma informed and expert at being able to speak to you, listen to you, and advise you. And so we're doing a number of things, Martha. One is we're invested in youth workers and training them up and professionalizing them to help victims, survivors of domestic abuse, domestic violence. You will know too many victims suffer in silence because they've no one to go to. There's a really horrific stat, which is often a victim will be a victim more than 3 dozen times before they'll go to their GP. And so we're making sure across London, pan-London, everyone understands how to ask the right question if they suspect somebody may be suffering it, they see, but also if they are on the receiving end of being informed about it, what steps they take, number one. Number two, we're doing lots of work around the victim side. I've appointed London's first independent victims commissioner, and she's trying to improve the experience a victim gets when they go through the criminal justice system. Often a victim will say, I felt as bad going through the process than being the victim in the first place. It was so traumatic. We're going to make it easier. And the third thing we're doing, Martha, is giving groups that work with women in particular funding from us, survivor groups, support groups, because they got no money, they can't have the staff. One group I heard, Martha, last year had a 6-month waiting list for rape victims. And so we put another £1.5 million in to help them. So we're investing lots of money here, but here's the issue. I think it's an issue for men and boys as well as women. It shouldn't just be about protecting women and girls. It's addressing the behavior of boys and men that leads them acting in this way. I want misogyny to be a hate crime. I think sexual harassment should be a criminal offence. I want there to be a register of those convicted of domestic abuse. We need to address the culture of misogyny in our society that leads to people being the victims of violence against them because they're women and girls. So we're taking lots of action. The manifesto, which Sunny's the only person in London, apart from my Tory opponent, who's read it, and my manifesto talks about some of this stuff, and we'll make sure we make available where the manifesto is so you can see some of the stuff we're doing. But thank you for having the courage to speak about this. It's really, really impressive. And we're going to refresh violence against women and girls strategy in term 2. And also in Martha, we're going to have in most live music venues, pubs, bars, a women's safety charter. So if you're being harassed in a pub or a bar, there's a safe word you can use so the staff know you are, and they'll kick out the harasser from that place of work. We want all public realm to be safe for women and girls. William, really important question. This question's dear to my heart because this is the issue that keeps me awake at night time, safety of Londoners. And you're spot on. It can't just be about more police, important though they are. We've lost 21,000 over the last 11 years across the country, thousands in London, community officers and police staff. But it's got to be about giving young people constructive things to do. Youth clubs, more than 100 youth clubs are closed down. Thousands of young people haven't got constructive things to do. Thousands of youth workers have lost their jobs over the last 11 years. So you're spot on. We've got to invest in young people, giving them constructive things to do. And that's why I'm really proud to have a Young Londoners Fund, giving hundreds of thousands of young people constructive things to do in education, culture, sports. We want to make sure there's a mentor every young person has, and everyone's going to have a great head teacher like I did. So we're going to give everyone a mentor, but also good quality youth services, William, because adults can't complain when young people may get involved in some antisocial behaviour if there aren't constructive things to do. I'm not excusing criminality, that's just the reality of life. But also we can't make sweeping generalisations against all young people because of a small minority involved in violent crime. And that's why we've got to make sure that older people understand it's a small minority and give them constructive things to do. That's why the Green Academy, the Creative Industries Academy, the Digital Academy, Health and Social Care Academy is giving young people the skills for the jobs of tomorrow. It's really, really important. And by the way, if anybody you know is carrying a knife, the best thing you can do to them if they won't take your advice to leave it at home is let the police know. People who leave home with a knife are likely to be less safe rather than more safe. And Croydon, William, we're doing lots of work with Croydon Council and young people in Croydon because you're spotting there's been too many heartbreaking stories of people being the victims of knife crime or ultimately losing their lives from a knife crime. really, really important. Sunny, listen, in relation to your lack of confidence in my ability to influence a horrible Tory government, let me tell you where we've been successful influencing this government. People said it wasn't possible to stop tenants having to pay a fee when it comes to going to estate agents. When I became mayor, we lobbied the government and they've removed the fee tenants pay. People said it wasn't possible when I became mayor to have a register of dodgy landlords, the rogue landlords register. Lo and behold, we've got one. You can type in the details of your landlord and find out whether he or she's a dodgy landlord. People said it wasn't possible to have a licensing checker in relation to who's got a license. And so there are things we've already done, getting rid of no fault eviction, but rent controls are important. I'll tell you why. And I think you said this in your question, Sunny, but although there's been a temporary blip in the rents going down, the reality is once we have a recovery, the rent's going to go back up. We are building record numbers of council homes, record numbers of homes where we pay social rent, record numbers of homes that are affordable. But in the short term to medium term, people are going to still rent privately. And that's why we need to help them renting privately in relation to rent control. If I win on May the 6th and I win big enough, that gives me a mandate to say to the government, Londoners want this, and we'll have a London Private Rents Commission to have policy leading towards rent control in London. The alternative is Londoners being priced out of our city, leaving our city, which is no good for London, no good for young people, and ultimately no good for the government.
Perfect. Thank you so much. We're going to get one more round of questions in. I know we're slightly over, but hopefully people can stay on. So I think we're going to go next to Mai. So if we could all keep it brief as well. So on all sides, Mai and Katie, I think, next as well, please.
Hi, my name is May. I wanted to ask a little bit of sort of a follow-up question. So I know you've mentioned a lot, and you've mentioned it quite a lot of times in your manifesto about how you want to increase funding for the police and employ more police. But as I'm sure you're aware, there's a lot of issues at the moment around the police sort of being institutionally racist. And do you really think by employing more police, that's going to fix the issue? And if not, what do you think is the best strategy to sort of resolve that?
Thanks so much, Mai. And Katie? Katie? No? Are you on mute?
Yes, sorry.
That's okay.
A bit tech difficulties. My question was to do with homelessness and how you will tackle issues of homelessness, and especially in terms of people that haven't really been supported by their local councils, and how will that kind of be addressed in order for homeless people to receive more support?
Thank you for those two. And
Great, thank you for that. So Mai, listen, I think we've got to acknowledge that there's racism in our society. I'm not somebody who accepts a shoddy report from the government that says there is no institutional racism or structural racism in our country. I think there's been huge progress made from when I was growing up, when my parents first came to this country, to now, but there's still problems in our country. The Commissioner of the Police has self-accepted on the day I published my action plan, which I'll come to in a second, that the Met Police Service isn't free from racism, discrimination or bias, acknowledged by the Commissioner of the Met Police Service. What I did, Mai, is last summer, when we saw the awful, brutal murder we now know of George Floyd, and we saw the Black Lives Matter movement taking pace across the world, I went around across our city and listened to the experience of Black Londoners, experts and others with the police, and my two deputy mayors, Dr. Debbie Weeks-Bernard and Sophie Linden. And from the listening exercise we did with Londoners, Black Londoners in particular, we came up with an action plan which sets out the route map, how we address some of the legitimate concerns that Black Londoners have, in particular, Black, Asian, minority, ethnic Londoners. And it's a problem for all of us, because if some parts of London's community lacks trust and confidence, don't be surprised if they don't come forward to report crimes, they don't come forward to be a witness, they don't join the police service, and so forth. And that means somebody who should be arrested, charged, prosecuted isn't, because of lack of confidence from an important part of London's community. So it's important for all of us to address the issue of lack of trust and confidence that there is from some communities towards the Met Police Service. So yeah, I'm not embarrassed of saying we need to get more Black officers in the Met Police Service and then promoted, more Black, Asian, minority, ethnic police officers in the police service, more women in the police service, at the same time as there been more scrutiny of the police. So the action plan Mike talks about how we scrutinise the police, the checks and balances, at how independent community groups monitor the body-worn videos that records the interactions when there's a stop and search and so forth. There is already started in London. No other police force has done this. There's now been a study of the stops of vehicles that police cars do as well. So that's what we need to do, Mai, is to make sure we address the concerns that London has had. The alternative, by the way, is what we've seen in the last 11 years, police officer numbers going down, crime going up. Nobody benefits from that, because I tell you who's the biggest victims of crime. It's Black, Asian, minority ethnic Londoners. And that's why it's in our interest to get more police officers, more diverse police officers, but also give the public more confidence in how the police are police. It's really, really important going forward. Katie, really, really important question. Look, I think genuinely, Katie, you judge a society by how it looks after the most vulnerable. And in the most progressive city in the world, it's shocking the numbers of rough sleepers in our city. There is some good news. Over the last 5 years, we from City Hall have taken 11,000 rough sleepers off the streets. 80%, 8 out of 10, have stayed off the streets. And over the last 15 months during the pandemic, we've taken 2,300 Londoners off the streets. 86% have stayed off the streets. The problem, Katie, is there's a pipeline of people going on the streets because of not enough affordable housing, because of welfare benefits policies, because of issues at home, and because people tend to come to London. And so, Katie, we've got a worked up plan, which we're saying to the government is, it's the same thing William asked about prevention in relation to crime. Prevent people becoming homeless in the first place is the way out of this. We're going to do our bit in relation to once they do become homeless, but the real prize, Katie, is stopping people becoming homeless in the first place. And by doing that, you stop the issue we see where people become homeless, and it leads to mental health issues, it leads to alcohol dependency, it can lead to drug dependency, and often it's chicken and egg. But we have got a plan to address that issue. We've made progress. The problem is, Katie, as soon as we take somebody off the streets and have them in for good, somebody else comes on the streets as well. And it's not helped, of course, with the last few months with hospitality, retail, culture, leisure, tourism having jobs being lost. But it's really important that we address this issue. It's heartbreaking to see talented people sleeping rough in one of the richest cities in the world.
Perfect. I think that's all we have time for. I'm just looking through the chat. I'm really impressed, guys, with all of the questions you have. I'm really sorry that I know there were so many questions, and I got loads of direct messages from different people saying they wanted to ask a question. So I'm really, really sorry. So I know that's all we have time for. We have such a richness and diversity of lived experiences just in this room, and it would be a missed opportunity if we didn't explore how we can take this forward. Sadiq, can I invite you to share your closing remarks? But just before you do, can I ask that you'll commit to working with us to arrange a youth summit at City Hall where young Londoners can directly engage in the policy areas that disproportionately affect us? And will you commit to meeting with us before the end of the year to continue this conversation?
It would be a pleasure to organise that. My team meets with young groups all the time, and my team will be more than happy to continue to engage with young people and listen, as importantly to you as well. It's really important that we do so. It's all well and good meeting. The key thing is listening, and hopefully you'll see that we walk the walk. It has been a great event. I've really enjoyed hearing your views and answering your questions. It's really important, though, this isn't the last time we have this engagement. And one of the things I've promised is to continue to regularly engage with you. The key thing we've tried to do over the last 5 years, whilst I've been mayor, is for me to be mayor for all Londoners. And that means those Londoners that do vote, but also those Londoners that don't vote. I'm afraid the bad news is too many young Londoners don't vote regularly. And what that means is that politicians often ignore the views of young Londoners, because frankly speaking, it's not your votes they need to rely upon to re-get their jobs again. It's older Londoners. And that's why it's really important that people like me do engage with you, not just at election time, but in between elections as well. I want to use my second term as mayor to deliver a better, fairer, greener, safer city for all Londoners, issues that you care about so passionately. London gave me the opportunities to go from a council estate to become a human rights lawyer, to run a business, and then to go from representing my local community as an MP to the cabinet, and then being elected as mayor of the greatest city in the world. My story and these experiences have been fundamental to shaping my outlook today and my aspirations and ambitions for London tomorrow, because I believe that every young Londoner, regardless of their race, gender, faith, disability, class, sexual orientation, or background, should have the same chances I was given, not just to survive, but to thrive. That's why my overarching mission for London is to ensure that all Londoners get the opportunities that our city gave to me and my family. It's the idea that there should be a helping hand to lead you along the path to fulfilling your potential. This is needed now more than ever. That's why there's so much at stake at this election on May the 6th. It's a two-horse race between me, who will stand up for our city and deliver a brighter future for young Londoners after the pandemic, or the Tory candidate who only talks our city down and doesn't share London's values of openness, equality, and respect for diversity. So if you want every Londoner to have the chance to get on, if you care about this great city and believe our best days lie ahead, if you love London, then please come out and vote for London by voting for me and for Labour on May the 6th. Thank you all so much for your time.
Thank you so much for your time. It's been a great evening, and thank you to everyone who's participated in the chat. Like I said, hashtag get involved and hashtag mapping young London. We've had a range of we've had a range of topics for young Londoners that care so much about what we've seen young Londoners are committed to building their communities and supporting the development of the capital. It is important that we note Sadiq is one of 20 candidates standing for the post of Mayor of London. The full list of candidates can be found on the London Elects website. Details are being shared in the chat box now. And please do use your vote on Thursday, May 6th. Your vote really does matter. And with that, thank you and goodbye. And also a quick thank you to Sadiq for committing to the Youth London Summit. So thanks to everyone. But thank you and goodbye. Thanks. Thank you for all your participation. Bye.
Woohoo!